Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Committee of the Whole meeting of Fernie City Council held on January 20th, 2026. Kiisukukit, we acknowledge the city of Fernie is located within Kukanamaka, the unceded territory of Yakutat Nucleat First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. The Kanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleat and are members of Ktunaxa-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. And before I call the meeting to order, I just wanted to, on a personal note, pass my thanks and kudos along to our local medical services. My wife had the misfortune of breaking her elbow last week, and the service we received at both the Elk Valley Regional Hospital and the East Kootenay Regional Hospital was exceptional. I just wanted to pass that along to those folks. We're very lucky for the facilities we have here. And with that, I will call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. and ask for a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation: that the agenda of the January 20th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Audie Kelly. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And a mover and a seconder for item 4.1. The following staff recommendation that the minutes of the December 16th, 2025 Committee of the Whole be adopted. Mover, Councillor Shoesmith, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. A speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes, and our corporate officer has some cue cards to alert you when you have 30 seconds left and when your time is up. And speakers are asked to state their full name and community of residence when they approach the podium. Thank you.
Your Worship, our speaker this evening is Wynne Kearns.
Welcome. Sorry, can somebody help her with the microphone? Perfect.
You got it. All right, you can hear me now. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Wynne Kearns of 172 4A Avenue, and I will be speaking about the 4A Avenue traffic study and report. And I do recognize that it's a kind of a small fish to fry, but it's important to me and it's important to my neighbors and it's important to everybody that uses that corridor. So I appreciate and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it tonight, even though it would have been great to have been able to appear as a delegate again, but the short notice didn't allow that. I did send an email to Mayor and Council. Hopefully you had a chance to review it. And if you didn't, I'm going to give you the Coles Notes version and I'm going to read it, and I'm hopefully not going to talk too fast, but I'm trying to get it all into 3 minutes. So here we go. Now, first, I want to clarify something in the staff report that states that the recent study, the study that was just done that you're talking about tonight, was requested by residents in 2024, and that's not accurate. What we asked for at that meeting was for council to consider a range of traffic calming options. And you may recall that council was in agreement in principle that traffic calming was needed there. Staff were directed to return with a report outlining costs, and that didn't happen. Instead, it was folded into yet another study. And unfortunately, I think that the study that was done was not very useful and was actually lazily done. Not contacting the city to find out if any construction was happening in an area where you're trying to figure out what traffic patterns are like seems lazy to me. Mislabeling maps seems lazy. And providing options with no discussion and costs with no rationale also seems lazy. But even with the study's weaknesses, it still confirms what we already know. When traffic flows freely, speeds and volumes increase. When there are natural or physical features that interrupt free flow, like the sharp curve on 4A or on-street obstacles, drivers slow down. That is the basic principle of traffic calming. The study itself presents 5 proposed improvements, but the staff report proposes 1, as if additional improvements aren't feasible. And that is misleading, in my opinion. The study doesn't recommend against multiple all-way stops, and it includes other practical measures that deserve serious consideration, including the on-street parking. The boulevards on 4A are city assets and should support pedestrian safety and walkability, and they are being degraded by vehicle parking. There are also some unclear and unsupported cost claims, like the suggestion that 2 all-way stops would require $40,000 in Jersey barriers without any explanation on why those might be required. Staff have already indicated that an all-way stop at 2nd Street could be installed for closer to $2,000. So that only needs 2 stop signs. That's about $1,000 a stop sign, if my math is right, which raises questions about how the estimates in the report were developed. So in other words, the city spent almost 2 years and 11 grand on a report that didn't offer anything new, reaffirmed that free flow traffic correlates with higher speeds and volumes, and then suggested again that we do another study. In my opinion, this could have been at the time a really easy win, and instead it's turned into more frustration, more wasted time, money, and resources. So what I'm asking council to do tonight is to think about all this information, and apply a critical lens to the report, recognize the gaps that are in it, and at least consider approving all-way stops at each of the intersections at $1,000 a stop. That's about $6,000 to take a first step to mitigate the traffic and speed along 4A Avenue with 30 seconds to spare. Thank you. That's it. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Cairns. Anyone online? Okay, thank you. With that, we will move along to item number 6, delegations and other presentations. We have a delegation from NWP Coal, the Crown Mountain Project overview. Mr. Dave Baines. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
You have 10 minutes, sir.
And I just have to get the Zoom meeting to know that I'm here.
Here. Yeah. It is this one?
Yep.
Okay, let's start that presentation and then share the, there we go. Out of your way. Thanks. There you are, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship, councilors, for having me here to give you an update on the Crown Mountain Coking Coal project, talk about some of our regulatory process and some land purchase we're working through. It's been a while since I've had a chance to talk to this council, so the project overview may be fairly basic. Some of you may already know this, but at heart, we are another small coking coal project located just over Erickson Ridge from the Elkview coal mine. About 12 kilometers as the crow flies from the town of Sparwood, BC. The project is pretty unique in a way because we're all in one watershed, the West Alexander Creek watershed, all the mine pits, all the waste rock, the plant, everything, all that water reports to one place, which makes water management and water quality control a lot easier than a mine site along a ridge line with multiple creeks coming off of it. It has 3 pits that we're going to develop in order, following input from Tanaka leadership to only take what we need. Originally, the plan was to open all the pits at once, and we're like, no, let's do this in sequence. So the first pit, North Pit, is years 1 to 4. Our East Pit is really just bridging between North and South Pit. The South Pit covers the rest of the mine life for year 5 through 15. Very small total footprint because the coal is quite shallow. So we don't have as much waste rock to move. We don't have to dig really big pits to get at the coal. So total footprint's more in that 850 hectare range. And we're thinking of producing around 2 million tons of coal per year for 15 years. So smaller project, smaller footprint, smaller impacts. So in the regulatory space, I thought I'd start with a bit of a background to tell you about the company through our regulatory story. The company really came together in 2010. They got our exploration permits in 2011, did the drilling to look for the coal in 2011 and 2012, and by 12 and 13, and by 2014, we had an initial project description ready to go to the BC government and the federal government to start the environmental assessment process. That got kicked off. A lot of work went by. We lost some years of COVID. 2024 comes around and we got into what the government calls the technical review phase. And that's when they give our application to the public, government, technical experts, Indigenous groups, and say, what do you think of this project? What could be done better? What questions remain? And we spent most of 24 and 25 answering those questions, making enhancements to the project, engaging, talking to the technical experts, and trying to deal with that feedback. And really for the next couple of years, what we're looking forward to is submitting more and more information into the government and the regulators, starting another formal review process, and then heading into a decision. Over the last couple of years, the biggest piece we've done is those project enhancements. We all knew that a railway loadout in a place called Grave Prairie could have problems. And we've come up with a new plan to really significantly reduce our impacts to that area. We wanted to use source control to manage all the selenium, keep it in the rock, but to provide a more guaranteed solution that has less risk to the government and the public and the First Nations, we've added active water treatment to it so that we have more control over that and more certainty. And we've also changed around our footprint and our layout to reduce impacts to fish and fish habitat. So those were the big three we knew about going in, and we made some big changes and really improved the project. Indigenous folks have been involved really from the get-go, but really heavy lifting has happened with Tobacco Plains since 2023, where we've started talking about where do we relocate the rail loadout? What do we need to consider? How do we do this in a way that works for you? And really been collaborative with Tobacco Plains. Other nations, we have 10 other nations we're dealing with, have been more on the sharing information, but getting ideas from them as well. Big focus on those enhancements, big focus on their draft chapters, because we've roped in a lot of information from the nations on their history, their traditional land use and other items, so that their voice and their views is better reflected in the application. And we've also been working on creating answers to the questions they filed as part of that technical review. And we're trying to meet with them and discuss those questions and answers before it goes to the government, because it's important to know if we've answered their question or even understood their question. So spending the time to say, what's the heart of this issue? Are we getting at it? What else can we do before it goes to the government? Of course, we are still talking to the government, so don't think we've given up on them. The BC government, they've been holding technical advisory committee meetings. That's in the old days, we called those working groups. They're called technical advisory committee meetings. We've met on noise and vibration, landscapes, vegetation, wildlife, economic conditions, socioeconomics of the project, and land use, and are really close to having a real all-encompassing meeting in February on all things related to water, water quality, water quantity, fish. It's going to be a big one. It's exciting. We've also been dealing with the federal government. Just in early January, we've submitted formal responses to them on our chapters on landscape, vegetation, and wildlife. We have 3 more chapters. We expect to get to them by the end of the month. So it's just plugging away, getting answers in front of regulators, meeting with them, seeing if we're on the right track. So on a side note to all this regulatory work we're doing, we're also looking at buying some land. And I want to tell you a little backstory on that because I'm a storyteller. I used to work with Mayor Milligan, and I think I caught his bug of telling everything through a story. In 2012, when we started to look at the project, we knew the closest good piece of land for a rail loadout was Grave Prairie. And the best way to deal with that would be to buy that land from the landholder, which Kenbeck, Canwell, Dolman changed hands multiple times. So we started engaging with them to try and buy that land. Of course, in 2023, Peck had more land and more money and bought the whole area and call it conservation land. So by 2019, we were in discussions with them and said, how about we buy some other land to offset our potential impacts to the land we want to use that you've bought? And we entered into a binding contract with Hanwell to buy 2 parcels of land and paid an annual fee to have that right to buy that land. Of course, in 2025, that land all changed hands. It is now with the Nature Conservancy of Canada. The good news is those agreements are still binding and moved over to NCC. And our step in 2026 is trying to purchase the land, but they're inside a large parcel and we have to do a subdivision to get our pieces out. So what does that look like on a map? That figure 80 thing is where our rail loadout had been on the Grave Prairie area. And so 2012, we're like, hey, we should buy this land around our rail loadout. Of course, 2023, that big green area is Teck's conservation lands. 2019, we looked at 2 little parcels north of Teck's conservation lands. And then, yeah, that big orange blob is a massive piece now owned by NCC in 2025. And the light green polygon on the bottom right is Teck's conservation land, just to sort of tie those 2 maps together. Where we are today, because we've done so many changes to the rail loadout, talking about offsets is a little less relevant. Originally, we needed like 50 to 80 hectares of their conservation land for our rail loadout. The new design, it's somewhere between 5 and 8. So yes, some offsetting and discussions are important, but it's not quite the same scale. And we're looking at purchasing about 400 hectares. So it is a slightly different story. And our relationship with Tobacco Plains Indian Band has really changed since then. And they're deeply involved in our discussions about those lands, how we might manage them, what we might do with them. And they see it as a good idea for us to keep pursuing it. We are pursuing it. So we're in that subdivision process. I don't know where I'm at for my time, so I'll go a little quick here. The 2 parcels, Sulphur Springs and the Confluence parcel. Sulphur Springs parcel has a spring in it known as Sulphur Springs. That is the Elkford Industrial Park in the top left of your photo there. So you sort of landmark yourself. Trans-Canada Trail runs through there. There's some really amazing wetland fen complex because of the warm water feeding it. And some old growth forest. I did have Fernie Tourism out there just this spring, and they were just blown away by this site. Confluence parcel is where the Elk River meets the Fording River. There's wetlands in there as well. There's some known archaeological sites. It's a pretty cool site. The Sulphur Springs is 50% in RDEK and 50% in DOE. So I've got 2 different parties to do my subdivision with, and it's half inside of the Agricultural Land Reserve, which adds a layer of complication. Confluence parcel is 100% RDEK, 100% in the land reserve. As I said before, the biodiversity value up at Sulphur Springs is amazing throughout that whole area. The Confluence site, yes, but there is an area that's been heavily used by campers and is very degraded. This is a Google Earth image. Every one of those white dots is an RV, camper, or tent. It's very heavily used. The big road network rented out, fire pits, pit toilets, whatever else being laid on the land. There is a tree planting camp in there that has 100 or more people living at it for 4 months a year. There's summer recreation. There's hunters. And then, of course, in our housing crisis that we're in, there's more and more squatters all the time. I think this might be increasing this year because EVR's pressuring people from moving off of some of their conservation land. I'll have to keep an eye on that. I can't say that with certainty, but there's a change happening. So we've got to do our subdivision. That'll put us through the Agricultural Land Commission, and you'll probably hear about it from your public. So in summary, we're making some huge regulatory process. We're super excited, and we're into the midst of a subdivision process.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Well timed. Questions, comments from council? Councilor Ramadas?
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Baines, how many jobs will you be creating via this project? Long-term, short-term jobs?
Thank you for the question, through your worship. The expected employment through construction is around 500 to 550 jobs. Some of those will be very specialized, like laying railway tracks. Some of them are typical earth movers, electricians, the kind of people we have in the valley already. Operations, it's in that 300 to 350 range. That sounds like a big number. You split it across 4 shifts and some office people, it's probably only a shift of 60 or so.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. How confident are you with the subdivision process going through successfully for you? Like, is that a big question mark over the entire project?
The land offsets are a nice to have, not a must have. So the success of the subdivision doesn't necessarily drive the success of the project. Certainly the agricultural land reserve folks are the largest challenge to the subdivision because they don't like people making parcels smaller per se. But we've been in extensive conversations with them and the RDK and with DOE, and believe we have a path forward where we can write things up to say we're going to maintain this for future potential agricultural use.
Further? I have a couple, Mr. Baines, if you don't mind. Just contextually, those look like large holdings that you're looking to purchase. And I apologize because I can't really visualize how small or large your loadout is on either of those parcels. Does it require, it doesn't require all that space?
So our loadout wouldn't be on either of those parcels. Our loadout remains next to the project area and would be on partially on conservation land, mostly within
Oh, I see. Okay.
the Canadian Pacific Kansas City Railway right of way. We've redesigned things to get most of the footprint into that existing disturbance, with probably, like I say, about 6 to 7 hectares that remains on the conservation land.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you.
Our purchase
yeah.
is nearby, a few kilometers away, but
Yeah.
in the 400 hectare range.
And that's the offsets you're speaking of in terms of
Yeah,
the conservation offsets.
yeah.
Who then, would you retain ownership of those conservation lands? If they're offsets, does that fall to you to own, or how does that work?
Since they're an offset between ourselves and another corporate entity, it is a bit of a odd duck. It isn't the government getting involved in that.
Mm.
We are a mining company. We have no long-term interest in being landholders. So we're in discussion with Yakutat Nucleates to see if perhaps they're the right home for those properties in the long term.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that for me. Just a curiosity, the tree planting camp, do they have a license of occupation? Are they there officially, or are they squatters?
They were under a letter of agreement between the property owner and the tree planters. There was
Okay.
no actual permitting or licensing that I'm aware of, but I do not wish to slander or
No,
make a
just
statement
curious.
about
that-
someone else's legality.
Yeah, it makes sense if if it was a forest company land and forest company was allowing them to camp there. And just the last question, in terms of your water management and active water treatment, how comparable to existing active water treatment in the valley? What size of facility are we talking about? Do you have a sense of that? Is it comparable to West Line Creek, Fording River South? I'm just curious.
The exact numbers are being worked out,
Okay.
so I can't say this is the exact number we're working on. We're at least an order of magnitude smaller, maybe 2 orders of magnitude smaller
Than West Line Creek.
than the only one I know the numbers for exactly is Fording North. So
Okay, okay. Thank you.
I don't know Line Creek's numbers.
No, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Baines. Anything else from council? Thank you. Appreciate the update.
Thank you very much.
And you're welcome to hang around, or you're equally welcome to sneak out. That brings us to item 7.1, the outcomes of traffic studies, a report from our project engineer line. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm here today to discuss 3 traffic studies our consultant ISL undertook for us in 2025 and get direction on the proposed solutions. And I'll go through them one by one instead of jumping around like I did in the report, just to make it more cohesive. The first study sought to assess the feasibility of enhancing pedestrian safety at the Mount Trinity Avenue intersections with Mount Ingram Street and Mount Clower Street, as requested by users of the Sophie Morgeau School. Pedestrians were concerned about the safety of this popular footpath along Mount Trinity Ave that crosses those 2 streets mid-block at unmarked locations. To assess safety concerns, the consultant first assessed existing conditions by conducting site visits by vehicle and on foot, collected and analyzed traffic counts via video recording, and reviewed collision data. That information was then reviewed through the Transportation Association of Canada, or TAC, guides, including the Pedestrian Crossing Control Guide. ISL found enhanced pedestrian infrastructure was desirable at these 2 crossing locations, and recommends installing marked crosswalks as per the 2 images of the 2 intersections. Curb extensions are also recommended to shorten the crossing distance, reduce pedestrian exposure to traffic, improve visibility between pedestrians and motorists, and lower a right turn vehicle speed. In this situation, staff recommend installing the permanent crosswalks at both mid-block intersections this year. We looked into what the estimate would be for temporary solution, which is paint instead of a permanent concrete crosswalk, concrete bump out and crosswalk. So that would just be signs, temporary bollards to delineate a temporary bump out that would be removed seasonally, painted crosswalks, and painted curb extension. At each location, it'd be about $4,000. Installing the long-term solution of those concrete curb extensions instead of the bollards and the paint would increase that to $23,000 per location. While the temporary solution is more cost-effective at the outset, it would require significant time for our operations staff in seasonal repainting and installation removal of those bollards. Thus, we recommend going forward with this permanent solution at this location, at these 2 locations. The second study assessed the feasibility of reducing speed limits to 30 kilometers per hour around 2 schools downtown, the Kootenay Discovery School and the Fernie Academy, as well as potentially the historic downtown surrounding these 2 facilities. To assess conditions, the consultant again conducted field reviews, traffic counts, and reviewed collision data. The information was then reviewed through the TAC school and playground areas and zones, guidelines for applications and implementations to see if school zones were warranted. ISL determined both schools warranted a school zone, as shown in the image above. However, it leaves this short 2-block-ish section in the middle where traffic could resume 40 kilometers an hour speeds. To improve driver consistency through these zones and our downtown core, it's recommended that the post speed limit for the entire historic downtown be reduced to 30 kilometers per hour at all times, which is a little different than a school zone, which is a daily speed limit. Thus, the historic downtown speed zone is proposed to support the safety of the schools and pedestrians through the downtown core. ISL suggested two main items: a 30-kilometer-per-hour speed zone, plus 3 intersections as seen on this image, with curb extensions to improve pedestrian safety and enhance driver compliance of adhering to the speed zone. Staff are proposing to move forward with just the speed zone and estimate the supply and install of the signage required would be about $14,000. City crews have the capacity to install those in this spring and summer season. This change would be accompanied by a public education through our city's communication team. The second item, curb extensions, were also a priority recommendation of the city's active transportation master plan. And it recommended installation at all intersections along 2nd from 3rd Street to 8th Street, instead of just these 3 intersections. The estimated cost would be about $30,000 per corner. So for these 3 intersections to get these bump outs, it's $360,000. And that's all these cost estimates are Class D for this presentation. Staff, we see the value of these bump outs, but believe that a major change to the downtown infrastructure would require more robust planning and engineering than was scoped out in this exercise prior to investigating such significant funds in improving the downtown. Consideration for these bump outs should be part of a larger review of the downtown functionality, as it would have significant impacts to the resident and visitor experience to our downtown, not negative, just a change, and the city's operation, and any adjacent desired changes, such as if we want to change parking directions on this street, direction of traffic, and beautification should be made as one cohesive, comprehensive improvement. Thus, staff are only suggesting to put in the historic downtown speed zone. The third and final study to be discussed tonight was requested by the residents at the south end of Maintown who suspected commuters were using 4th and 4th A Avenues and 1st Street to quickly traverse this neighborhood using these local roads instead of the collector roads of 4th Street and 1st Ave. The consultant reviewed the current transportation facilities in this area, conducted field reviews, undertook traffic counts and speed surveys, and assessed collision data to provide recommendations for the traffic calming approaches. And this was in line with what was recommended, that the committee direct staff to bring back a report regarding traffic calming solutions and costs for 4A Ave for a future council meeting. ISL confirmed that motorists are using 4A Ave and the 1st Street corridor as an alternative to the collector roads to quickly access either the highway or the Mount View neighborhoods. Some speeding along this route was confirmed. The study provided 3 main recommendations to discourage shortcutting and speeding along this route. The first is to convert an intersection along the route to an all-way stop. Adding a stop to this route will slow down traffic and make the corridor less attractive to those users. There are 2 good candidates: 2nd Street at 4A Ave, or the intersection where 4A Ave, 4th Ave, 3rd Street, and the road to the Dogwood Boat Launch, which I'm just going to refer to as the 3rd Street intersection from now on because that's a mouthful. At this 3rd Street intersection, ISL proposed a mini roundabout as the best way to reduce vehicle speeds, enhance pedestrian crossings, and improve sightlines. However, at a Class D cost estimate of $550,000, it's little cost prohibitive. Instead, they said, well, you could start off with an all-way stop to be installed. However, this is a little bit of an awkward intersection. It's not standard. It's not like a cross. It's wider and there's a curve and sightlines. So to improve those sightlines and vehicle behavior at this location, Jersey barriers are proposed on the bottom right corner, as you can see on the above image, to make the curve more of a corner. So build it out into a corner, install stop signs and paint so cars have a place where they know they have to stop, and make it just more standardized. The other intersection that they discussed is the 4A Ave at Second Street, which is a T intersection and only requires 2 stop signs to be installed. And this intersection is in the middle of the route as well. So placing an all-way stop here slows down traffic equally in both directions. The second option they discussed is to convert 4A Ave between 2nd and 3rd Streets into a one-way northbound road. This option would squash commuters' ability to use it to travel south to back to the Mount View neighborhood, but it would also unnecessarily limit public use of this roadway, which is a shared community asset, and shift traffic onto adjacent streets. You might just move the rat running around. As such, it was not considered a recommended option by staff. The third option was to install speed humps along the corridor. And speed humps do create significant challenges when snow clearing, or we would remove them for the winter, which is a lot more operational cost. So this was also not considered a viable option by staff, as if we remove them in the winter, then there's no speed humps to slow people down. What the study determined based on the overall traffic volumes is that all the options are not necessary, and the city could begin with one of the all-way stops to see how that improves the safety for the residents. So staff propose installing an all-way stop at the intersection of 2nd Street and 4A Ave, the T intersection, instead of the larger 3rd Street intersection, as it would be more effective at slowing down drivers across that straight stretch. Furthermore, a second traffic count and speed survey is proposed once that infrastructure has been installed for a few months to determine the effectiveness of this option and if additional measures should be started or warranted. So staff can supply and install the signage in-house for approximately $2,000. We also thought the cost estimate provided by the consultant was a little high, which is why we costed it in-house. They said it was about $7,000. And the follow-up assessment and speed survey would be about $3,000 to $4,000. These costs could be covered through allocations of existing operating budgets to address these items. So in summary, here's a little quick table of the costs for the proposed solutions that staff are recommending. And the 2 top ones, Mount Trinity Ave safety review and the downtown speed limit, we are proposing to go through the 2026 budget, and the 4A traffic calming study can be done with the operating budget that already exists. These 3 studies were completed with the support of ICBC, who paid for half of each of the study costs. ICBC is also willing to provide some funds to follow through with study recommendations. Contingent on council's approval of the proposed next steps, staff plan to continue discussions with ICBC to cost share construction costs. I put in the full budget here because we have not yet had any discussions of dollar amounts with ICBC. Yes, so in summary, there is many directions requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Line. Questions, comments from council? Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. I'm not fully sure I understand why we need Jersey barriers. If you can explain what the purpose of those would be on that one intersection.
Just going to go back to that presentation.
I
Sorry.
think it'd probably be prudent to leave your presentation up so we'll likely be flipping back and forth a bit here.
Oh, all right. So the top image is how they propose to put together the all-way stop at the 3rd Street intersection. So currently when you drive around 3rd Street, as you can see with my little cursor there is a curve. It's a retaining wall and it's very curved and it makes it quite wide. And we don't want that. We actually want a more standardized intersection. So we would place the Jersey barriers in front of that curve and make it more of a square instead. That's where the Jersey barriers go. And then a stop sign is mounted on the Jersey barrier. And then paint lines come off that to more standardize the intersection.
Is part of that thinking so that also provides shelter for pedestrians on that, if they're walking on that corner?
No, actually, at this like cost D level, we didn't really discuss how the pedestrians are going to get around the Jersey barriers and things like that. So it was not actually looked into at this level.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments from council? Councillor Ravenous and then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, engineer. I have a couple of questions. In terms of I'll just go through like these three distinct buckets first. I'll just talk about Mount Trinity first. In Mount Trinity, have we had any public engagement at all in that neighborhood?
If I may, public engagement wasn't part of the studies, but the request came from the community.
Further?
Do we know whether the improvements that we are suggesting here would be okay with those folks?
If I may, yes. So they came, the students, the Sophie Mongeau came to ask for improved safety for the pedestrian like passage along the street. We can definitely go back and ask if this is up to their standards, but the studies were all done by road safety and traffic engineers following the crosswalk guides and that's what this is meeting those criteria.
May I, Councillor Ramdas, just on the heels of that, would we, if the direction tonight was to consider the permanent curb bump outs, for example, with a crosswalk, that would trigger community consultation in terms of the neighborhood? Am I correct?
Mayor, yes, I think the point of this committee report was to confirm council's interest in pursuing these and to
Yeah.
allow us to develop a project plan to bring them forward in the capital budget. And so once they are moved into a capital budget and then approved in a capital budget, that's when we would look to, send out notices and engage the public on their thoughts. But prior to that, we would be hesitant to contact the residents suggesting that this may be an improvement if council hasn't budgeted and endorsed the improvement.
Yeah, very fair. Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. My next question is with regards to the downtown traffic speed zone, because a portion of that is school zone, would the entire area fall under kind of the same regulations of school zones? Or would it be just a separate area where our speed limit is reduced? And what really triggers the question is in the report, the highest speed on 2nd Ave going southbound was 109 kilometers an hour. That's got to be losing a license type level on a pedestrian street. And I'm just curious if with it being 30 kilometers, if there's an additional implication of being school zone or just strictly on speed.
If I may, yeah, when I read that report, I was also like, that must be a typo. And then they went to discuss it in further detail. Oh, not a typo. Okay. Someone had actually driven that speed. So this is a stronger recommendation than just a school zone because a school zone is only certain hours of the day. And this is recommended all day, 24/7. Yeah. So it is a speed zone that is different than a school zone because it's actually, less flexible.
Councillor Adi Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Full disclosure, I do live in the Mount View, also known as the airport to us old timers. But I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't really the neighborhood itself that requested those traffic changes. It was students from the school who may not necessarily live in the neighborhood. So in my opinion, just based on other areas where we've done some of our active transportation master plan planning, I think we would want to do some engagement with residents before really moving forward with bump outs and things like that. Just in that particular instance, the downtown speed limit, it actually kind of makes more sense to me to make the whole, if we're going to reduce it, it makes more sense to me to make it the whole area, because I think you mentioned engineer line that kind of would leave a gap in the middle where you could speed up and then you'd have to slow down again. That seems not common sense to me. And then with the 4A piece, I like the idea of starting out with the stops at the one intersection where it's kind of in the middle and it will be really visible and obvious. I'm worried about that other intersection at Third, as you mentioned, like the retaining wall and the shape and sliding through it in winter. I don't know, it seems to me that needs more thought. And pedestrians as well, because it's already tricky for pedestrians. So I feel like that particular intersection on that road needs more thought put into it. So I agree with the recommendation to put the stops where on the second. So thank you.
Mr. Bornowski, and then Councillor Nixon, then Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask a point for clarification from Councillor Hamilton. Are you asking specifically about would the higher tickets for speeding that one gets in a school zone apply to a general 30-kilometer-an-hour zone throughout the city? Is that the clarification you're after?
That was essentially what I was after, is if that higher ticket, if it's a blanket 30K zone, or if it's actually the whole downtown core gets designated as a school zone. But I think Engineer Ms. Lyons' response about it being a blanket speed limit, it's not hour dependent. I think that makes a lot of sense.
If I can then clarify to council, it's correct. There's a slightly higher fine for speed in a school zone compared to speed on municipal line, different sections of the Motor Vehicle Act. And so the school zone increased fines would only apply within the school zones, within the blanket zone.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I like the idea of the permanent solution on Mount Trinity. I do think that we need to engage with the residents down there. But we had all those students, I mean, that came to us and the parents, and we had letters and we had all sorts of stuff. So, you know, I mean, I hope that those people would engage with some of the residents as well to let them know it's not just us. But I do like that permanent solution for traffic safety and students getting to school and stuff like that. As for the downtown, I'm just curious about the number of signage that we are putting in. We're putting in an additional 24 sign, and I'm just curious about if there's such a thing as sign fatigue. And I would almost be in favor of making the entire main town or the city of Fernie a 30-kilometer-an-hour zone. There's lots of municipalities out there, Whistler, Rossland, where it's all 30 kilometers an hour, except for some main artery roads that are 40 kilometers an hour. So you could just post 10 signs coming into town, right? And going into in some of the areas. I think that where I live in the main town, the new stop sign that's right next to my house has significantly slowed down traffic going north to south. But east to west, the traffic is still flying. They're still going super fast. So I would like to see it reduced, maybe 30 kilometers an hour zone for the entire area. And I don't know if that's a staff report. I don't know if I have the support of council, but that's just the way I feel about it. And then as for the 4th Avenue, the 3rd Street intersection, I would like to see a 4-way stop just put into that 3rd Street intersection, and then 3 stop signs put into the 4A and 2nd Street. I think that we need to slow people down on there. I'm not a big fan of the speed bumps, but I think that the stop signs work well. So I don't know where that leaves us. I don't really have any questions, or just comments.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
Counselor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Several things, seeing as this is so many. Yeah, I opened this up here and I saw the 4th A Ave thing and just that meme popped into my head of the sidewalk where it's a right angle and there's a little dirt track going between, rounding out the corner. This really looks exactly like that. You know, I think feels a bit like, how to put it? I mean, I'd be okay with a couple stop signs or something there. That could make sense. I think that wouldn't break anybody's budget and would help mitigate. But as a broader point, in relation to all of these, I think in my time here, when we've implemented the ATMP, it's quite often very unpopular. People generally don't like change. I mean, if I was, you know, lived at that house and the street bump out happened and that's where I like to park or something, now you can't. I mean, I'm not sure. I do have some questions, such as, you know, these bump outs, how's that going to impact our plowing? If we were to go with that. I mean, I'm sure they can plow around them, but it's a thing to think about. But more broadly, and more to my point, I feel that given how many issues we have to deal with, possibly in the hopefully somewhat near future with our pipes, I think we should be saving the budget with this to deal with streets that are in relation to those pipes. And I'd be really reluctant to spend money on too many road things unless it's in relation to that, aside from simple and cheap fixes such as some stop signs perhaps on the one intersection there at 4th A. Thank you.
Counselor Ida Kelly.
I have to agree that Councillor Shoesmith makes some excellent points. I also do think, Councillor Nixon, that there's some merit to making the whole town 30K. I'm wondering, and maybe not Engineer Line, have you gotten any feedback or any kind? We put in a 3-way stop, which some folks call a stoptional, at Kaikato Road and help me out, Mount.
Yeah.
Not Clower. McLean. Have we gotten any feedback to the, like, how has that worked? Has it made a big difference to the efficacy? Because I'm just going to go, I'm going to hark onto the comments made about ATMP. I alluded to it, but I'll just be really blunt. Every time we have done something with our ATMP, we have gotten considerable negative feedback. So I think it behooves us to do some engagement. I mean, when I first moved to the airport 30 years ago, there was a school with well over 100 children attending it, right? So that school was extremely busy all day, every day, etc. And as far as I know, throughout my lifetime there weren't any disasters or major pedestrian problems in the neighborhood. So I'm just kind of wondering how that's worked out. Like, has it been a good thing? Has it caused maybe more accidents rather than less? Because I don't know that everyone actually stops there. So that's kind of something that makes me cautious too about 4A Avenue when I look at that, you know, the third intersection. It's such a weird intersection as it is. I think it needs more than just putting up stop signs. That seems not a good idea to me. Whereas the other intersection seems like a safer, more visible place where it would be easier to stop. So I am curious if we've had where we've changed traffic or where we've put stop signs, have we then done follow-up to see how effective it's actually been?
If I may, I haven't heard any feedback from that Kaikato intersection improvements, nor did we do any follow-up. So that's a great opportunity for this 4A is we can, within our existing budgets, do another round of traffic and speed afterwards to see if it is actually doing what it's supposed to do as a follow-up.
Just from personal experience, I would suggest that intersection, which is also a non-standard intersection, given the steepness of the Mount McLean, where it enters, the angle and the steepness where it enters that intersection. As a driver, I find that provides me a whole lot more comfort knowing it's an all-way stop, because the visibility is such, and it suggests to me that I guess you were calling it the 3rd Street intersection, could also benefit from some control, just to provide comfort to those people entering that intersection, that it's an all-way, because there again, because of the way the road enters from the bottom, from the Dogwood Park direction, the visibility is atrocious. And I find I don't get the Jersey, I confess, I don't get the Jersey barrier thing. If we were to install stop signs and lines, given the retaining wall is there, and we haven't considered pedestrian safety, that feels adequate to me. Like personally, I would like to pursue that as an option in addition to the other one. If like the two intersect, it doesn't seem like it's cost prohibitive necessarily. And it does suggest to me that it would improve both driver safety and driver comfort, as well as slowing the traffic down through there.
If I may,
Yeah,
a
please.
point of clarification, there is already stop signs at that intersection, just the east and the west. So 3rd Street going into that
I know,
intersection,
yeah.
and so it's not, yeah.
But I think that's the issue, not unlike Mount McLean, is when you're entering that, because it's not a controlled intersection from the other way. It is nerve-wracking, either as a driver or pedestrian, quite frankly, crossing that intersection to go uphill. You don't have great field of vision coming out of there, because the cars crest that hill very quickly. And if there was a stop sign there, they'd likely going less quick. Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Rowda.
Yeah, I was just going to support what you're saying, that I think putting stop signs at the 3rd Street will support both vehicular safety and pedestrian safety. I know we're not contemplating, there's nothing specifically there. There's no sidewalks for one.
No.
But having walked that intersection many, many times with my old office right around the corner, crossing 4A or 4 Ave, whichever section that is, it's scary, especially when you're coming up from the dog park, because it's a blind corner with people coming down. And I mean, if we're worried that people aren't going to be able to stop in time on those roads because they're going too fast, then maybe that is actually the signal that we need to put something there to get people to slow down and stop.
Councillor Rowda.
Thanks, Your Worship. I've got a few things to comment and maybe one question. Don't know how my ramble will go here. Just bear with me here. I just want to recollect a little bit, Councillor, to your point about McLean and Coqueto intersection. We had a very similar conversation like this early in the term, and how we came up with that, what do you call it? Stoptional sign is that we said, okay, what's the lowest cost, easiest solution to this issue? We had a proposal coming from the school kids about some extensive sidewalk project, which was cost prohibitive. And I think Councillor Shoesmith and I proposed that let's go with the cheapest option. So that's how we came up with it. And as a single data point here, myself, I can tell you that I have seen most of the vehicles stop there. So at least by my observation, it has been a success. But I do get your point, as well as Councillor Nixon's point, that there are just too many stop signs, and maybe there's a sign fatigue in town. Anyway, that was not my point. The thing that I wanted to just state from my personal preference, engineer, I would just want each of these 3 packages that we have in front of us to be as simple as possible. To Councillor Nixon's point, the whole downtown, too many signs, I feel if we can somehow standardize the whole thing to 30 kilometers an hour and possibly through the town, that would be a good fix. This 4A intersection, just all sign, put it, forget it. Let's not do any study or anything, just one sign so that it just provides some comfort to people in the neighborhood. And as far as Mount Trinity is concerned, that was just the kids who came to us. We still need resident involvement. And I do appreciate that it'll come through the budget process and we will have an extensive interaction with the residents there. But I feel like there is a lot more changes than what I anticipated there. Finally, coming to my question now, where does all these road improvements, whatever we have, show up in our IICP prioritization? And I'm just asking this in relation to what Councillor Shoesmith asked, are there any pipes that can be fixed as well as roads that can be fixed at the same time?
So the IICP is more based on condition. And so whenever we look at a road asset for replacement, it's because the condition of the road is at such a degraded state. So these types of things are more superfluous to that, stop signs and things. So it's not considered as much. However, especially for that has been identified as the next road to be rehabilitated. And the plan, we already have approved budget to do the design of that. So it's 4th from this 3rd Street intersection just past the courthouse. And we're also doing the design at the other end of downtown, the 2 streets between 13th and 11th. And so we're looking into seeing if we could mesh those 2 projects together. Cost-wise, like if we went for the roundabout, right, that wouldn't cost, it's still cost prohibitive. Yes. But
So, sorry, just on that, I apologize. I know there's other people on the speakers list, but we would be redesigning or finishing the redesign of 4th Avenue. Would it carry on right through what we're looking at here in terms of where it turns into 1st Street? Like, would that be part of that entire design?
the part we're looking at would finish in this intersection. So we were trying to see if there was options to improve the 3rd Street intersection as part of that job.
Okay, thank you. Director Weir?
If I may, just for additional clarity, I would say these type of projects, like Engineer Line said, are more similar to a requested improvement such as the Mount Fernie Park Road improvement, where they're not at all contained in our infrastructure capital plan. They're not based on replacing aging. They're improvements to existing conditions. So the IICP is strictly replacing like for like with existing conditions and doesn't consider any improvements. So.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I apologize if I'm rambling. I'm fairly tired. It's been a series of rather early mornings. The money does come from the same kitty, though, in terms of the roads. That's where it's significant for me. I would just like to point out that it's a very human thing, a very common thing to, when there's a rule being broken and people see a rule breaker, like the person who was driving at whatever that speed was, to go, we need to tighten the rules up, which I actually find kind of, I understand where the impulse comes from, but that doesn't really affect that rule breaker at all. That affects everybody else. The guy speeding at 100 and whatever down Main Street there, he's not thinking, oh, a slightly higher fine from 40 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour. That's my risk calculation. That just affects everybody else who now gets a 41 kilometer an hour speeding ticket. It doesn't affect those outliers, which you would have anyway. I'm all right with the crosswalks and the stop signs. That makes sense. Those are pretty straightforward, simple things. you know, talking around changing the speed limit for the whole town, that's, I think that's a pretty big decision. Not really sure how I feel about that. The staff recommendation as stands with just the rectangle of Maintown with its, what was it, Troy, 24 signs?
24 sign.
Thank you. I mean, sign fatigue, but you're not going to drive past more than one set on your way in and out. You're not going to see 57 signs. You're going to see two. So, I mean, it's actually not, I think that's actually an all right idea myself. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. You know, just kind of taking the ball of dropping it to 30 kilometers an hour and trying to find the simplest solution. How many of our traffic calming measures, how many of our concerns about crosswalks and people running stop signs suddenly also disappear if people just have to go slower through town? You know, are kids going to feel safer crossing the street? Are parents going to feel more comfortable with their kids biking along the edge of roads, knowing that vehicles, the max speed limit is 30? And to Councillor Schusman's point, yeah, there's going to be the individuals who are going to be the scofflaws, and that's not going to make a difference per se. But by and large, social pressure can have its impacts. And if that is the standard, then what will the consequence of that be, or the results, benefits of that? And then, sorry, if I may, just as a procedural or practical question, what would be the steps to go that direction if we wanted to just drop the speed limit to 30 citywide?
If I may, I believe at this juncture, we wouldn't make that decision. It would be direct staff to bring back a report on the implications and how that would happen in the cost to change the speed limit within town.
Mr. Baranowski?
Council, when you've spoken a bit about engagement and consultation, I would raise the consideration of scale. We're talking in one piece about a $30,000 bump out, a minor change to some curbing and some crosswalks in a mainly residential neighborhood. Very minor. You probably wouldn't really do much more consultation other than notifying people it's coming. We're slightly changing this intersection in front of your house. There has been so little change in terms of pedestrian safety in Fernie that people are surprised when it happens. And I think that the city has experienced that when we've added in multimodal sidewalks and multi-use pathways, because they seem really different than no sidewalks and I can park wherever I want, right? But for a change as significant as 30 kilometers an hour across town, you probably want some significant public engagement. And so directing the change around downtown is quite straightforward. We have 2 school zones, connecting them. We may want to be communicating with the business community a little bit downtown to make sure they appreciate the rationale and why it's coming. But broader, I think you'll probably want to hear from the community about what they perceive the impacts of. And so that's probably a slightly longer term project, if I could make that recommendation.
Councillor Oddie Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just engineer lines, apologies. So the 4A and 3rd Street intersection is going to be part of the redesign of 4th? Or did I misunderstand? I apologize. I just wanted to get that clear in my brain.
Yeah, as I understood, the redesign comes to that intersection, so it would include that intersection.
Okay, that's what I thought, Your Worship. So that being in mind, I wouldn't be in favor of spending a lot of money on that intersection at this point in time. I think we really need to be cognizant of the linear assets and the costs that we're looking at, and spending money to then just have to change it or possibly have to change it doesn't make sense to me. So at this present time, I would be in favor of the most cost-effective thing that might, and see how that goes. I like your point that it gives us the opportunity on 4A to do that after study and say, hey, is this helping or working, or what more do we need to do? I think that's prudent.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure I agree. Because of the addition of 4 stop signs, or well, 2 stop signs on that intersection and some painting, line painting, does for me create, like, it's a significant change in terms of a potential driver behavior. And it provides us with an experience. So what do we see before we redesign that intersection for the 4th Avenue improvement project? So I don't necessarily agree from that perspective, because it's not a very cost prohibitive change, a couple of signs and some lines. And yeah, just my personal experience with that intersection, it's atrocious. Like it's just nerve wracking every time I go through there, up or down. I typically don't go north or south on it. So I am also, I'd like to comment on the airport. I think that's a worthy project. It's a change. Yes, it improves pedestrian safety. I've often wondered, and I've wondered when this was brought to us before, there are designated walking trails and cycling trails up to the street at that point, and no pedestrian crossing. I don't know why that was never put in. That has never made sense to me, because it's a continuous line right through that subdivision that would get kids to school, for example. So that just feels like an oversight to me. I do appreciate there is an education and an awareness piece. We saw just recently with the Cedar Avenue changes, particularly to street widths, create some driver discomfort. So I think there's a pretty good engagement piece required for that. And the downtown, the downtown one just makes sense to me in terms of lowering the overall speed limit downtown. I don't think, I appreciate Councillor Susan's perspective. I don't think we're responding to a 109-kilometer speeder. I mean, but lowering it around in the entire community, it's 40 kilometers now. I challenge you to find anybody who travels less than 60 kilometers an hour in some of the feeder streets in the annex, for example. Like it's crazy. I'm often swearing under my breath at drivers as they go past. So, we're potentially creating a larger problem for ourselves by trying to enforce an even lower speed limit. I do think we need to consult with our RCMP and our enforcement folks to get a really clear picture of what we're seeing or what they're seeing in this community in terms of traffic speeds. But I could certainly support the downtown, and particularly on Main Street. Like, if you're traveling more than 30 kilometers on Main Street, you're very likely to hit somebody because people step out all the time, whether they're at a crosswalk or not. Yeah, those are just sort of just my initial observations. Like that 4th A Avenue one has been a bone of contention for a long time. And I think there's really something we could consider doing that is not that cost prohibitive in the short term, and then provides us some information when we do the entire redevelopment project. And I don't think that would be money poorly spent. Those are just my thoughts on the matter. Councillor Ravenous.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well put. I think one thing that I clued in from your comment there was more around the Cedar Avenue too, because when we had this conversation around Cedar Avenue redevelopment, refurbishment, we all assumed that it was straightforward, very less trafficked, it's just a feeder street and things like that. And when the project started progressing, we just realized there was a lot of pushback from the residents. So when someone says, oh, this is a small road improvement projects, we don't have to do a lot of engagement, I am a little skeptical when that thing comes up. No road project is going to be straightforward, and there will be someone who will be affected, and it will be affecting that particular neighborhood, that particular person, that particular house more than the others. And we get an impression that the entire project is actually, misplaced.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we got to be really careful when we say that, this is an easy project. Let's get done with it without public consultation. And I appreciate that this is all going to happen during the budget process, and we will have step-by-step consultation, but earlier the better, even if it is a small project.
Yeah, I think when I saw the bump outs, which I appreciate we're not doing or aren't part of the proposal on Second Avenue, I also thought, again, that's going to freak some people out. They've been turning those corners for 50 years, and now suddenly the corner is wider and the street will feel narrower, and there's an F-350 in the intersection already, and it's going to feel like really tight. So that, those sorts of things need, I think, considerable consideration in terms of the engagement. Even with these small bump outs that you're proposing here, I think it will change the driver dynamic and their experience of driving. And so they really need to be aware that it's coming and this is what it's going to look like. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. It was actually a really good report. It was a really good read. It's really fulsome. I appreciate that. And back to the crosswalks down in the airport there. You're mentioning that, it feels weird that there's those paths and then they terminate. If I recall correctly, and our youth counselor's been through driver training more recently than I have, if paths terminate on the edge of a street, you're supposed to treat it as if it was a sidewalk. A crosswalk, if you're a driver, if I remember that right. So, I mean, really, you're right. There really should be a crosswalk.
Yeah, if it's unmarked though, drivers, and I think
might not.
It's never been marked, so drivers habitually don't even sort of recognize it. Or was it marked at some point? I just feel like it was, and it's just gone by the wayside. No, Councillor Roddy Kelly?
Yeah, it's not, but it's also not lined up exactly perfectly either.
No, fair enough. Do you mind putting your presentation back up and just
Like
kind of-
that's kind of part of it, I think.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But it's always felt odd to me that you would put in that pedestrian infrastructure and not create crosswalks. where
Like a
it needs.
painted crosswalk would
Yeah.
make it a little more clear to
Yeah.
people for sure.
Yeah, because if you look at that on where the orange circles are on the far right, there is the path, and then that could conceivably connect to the sidewalk, and on the other end as well, the same
Yeah,
thing.
it's just a little offset enough
Yeah.
that I don't know if that's why they didn't do it, Your Worship. I don't know.
I don't know, but to Councillor Shoesmith's point, it may be why drivers don't treat it as a potential crosswalk. So marking it, I think, just makes sense to me. I don't know if we got consensus on any of that, but let me just look through the draft recommendations here. And sorry, before we proceed, I just one more question. So ICBC has indicated they will participate on some level with the recommendations, the implementation of recommendations of this effort. Do we have any sense of at what level they'll participate?
If I may, no, my contact started out this conversation before the end of last year.
Okay.
And was like, we'd be happy to help contribute to that based on these studies. And then the next step was getting the buy-in from council of the direction to go. And then we would have a cost estimate and to then go forward with them. Yes, they did 50% on the design, the study. But I have no idea, sorry.
Okay.
I shouldn't have even said that.
No, I appreciate that. You don't know how much they could contribute on that. That's fair. And if we advance all of these, and I'd actually like to amend the 4A Avenue one, personally, every one of these will come back before anything is done, will come back through the budget process. Is that correct?
If I may, 2 out of 3, the 4A with just the T intersection, we were saying we could cover that under the operating budget.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Well, with that, I'll ask our corporate officer, and before you read the final one, I'd like to make amendment to that if I could.
So the first staff recommendation is that committee directs staff to pursue Mount Trinity Ave long-term crosswalk improvements in partnership with ICBC, and that staff be directed to include project costs in the 2026 capital budget for council's consideration.
Mover, Councillor Ramadas, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Second recommendation is that committee directs staff to implement a historic downtown and school speed zone in partnership with ICBC, and that staff be directed to include the related project costs in the 2026 capital budget for council's consideration.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'd like to amend the last one to include, so as is, but also include an all-way stop at 3rd Street intersection. Does that capture it?
Okay.
Councillor Shoesmith?
We should ask if that's still fits within operating budget.
If I may, we didn't update the ISL budget for that intersection because we were more focused on the T intersection. I don't think it would come in at what they proposed at 40. I just have my notes here, but I think it would be much less, probably within $10,000 for paint, 2 stop signs, and Jersey barriers. Something around $10,000.
Are we better positioned here, Engineer Lina? Because I don't want to put you on the spot. Are we better positioned
Look
to,
into it.
for you to update this and come back? Or Mr. Bornowski?
Director Weir and I would prefer personally if we could just bring this back as part of the capital budget process. They're not works that we'd be undertaking in the next 2 months. We'll get through that process
Okay.
in the next 2 months.
Is that reasonable? Is that reasonable for council?
Yeah. Oh, no, that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, I don't want to put anybody in the spot, least of all you, Engineer Line, or council in terms of, leap of faith in terms of costs. So, Councillor Evans.
What if we just go ahead and just put the sign cheap option and then all the other work with respect to Jersey barrier and painting that can come through the capital budget? I just don't want to
Yeah.
stop the momentum. No pun intended, but
Yeah. Yeah, like in terms of adding 2 stop signs.
Yeah, just do
okay.
the stop sign. It is a incremental, quick win. Just do it, and then the future development of
Yeah.
Jersey barrier and painting can come via the budget process.
Yeah, and sorry, Engineer Line, the Fourth Avenue redevelopment, is that going to happen? It won't happen in 2026.
If I may, no. So the
Yeah.
design, based on the amount we have in the savings for road, we didn't think we could do all 4 blocks in 2026. We didn't think we had the money saved up for that. So we are waiting until 2027, which is our typical every 2 years, we do a major road rehabilitation project, get most bang for our buck.
Ms. Barnowski.
Ms. Weir has shared that we typically wouldn't be drilling and installing stop signs during these winter months anyways. Like if we have no snow and it stays cold, it's maybe more straightforward than, but
Yeah, and we'll have a clear answer on the dollar figure if we defer this until the budget discussion. Councillor Adi Kelly?
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify, like, are you saying you want to put stop signs at both intersections or just the one staff is recommending that we can meet through current budgets?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just one.
Okay.
Done.
Yeah, sorry, I was actually suggesting both.
I know, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, just do one and whatever remaining items, we can tackle that
Then that
during
can come
the.
back. So we
Yeah.
could, I like that suggestion, actually.
Yeah.
Move this as suggested and then bring the other back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
thank you
let's
for that.
not
Yeah.
lose the momentum.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that makes good sense.
Yeah.
Oh, with that, I'll ask you to read the existing recommendation. Because I haven't actually tabled it.
Okay. So the staff recommendation is that committee directs staff to install an all-way stop at the intersection of Second Street and 4A Ave, the T intersection, and survey the traffic response in 2026.
Moved by Councillor Ramadus, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any further discussion? Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I think the stop signs are probably a good idea. All the additional rebuilding of the intersection and such, no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. If we are going to be having the 3rd Street stop signs come back for capital budget discussion, do we want to amend this motion to have this traffic survey response in 2026? Wait until we've made a decision on that, or do we want to proceed with that survey as it stands?
Well, I think to Councillor Ramadus's point, if we continue with what is proposed, then we know we have some direction and include some traffic calming measures on that road. And we will hear back, including with the survey and the response, that's going to happen anyway, based on this recommendation. And we'll hear back on the costs for potential improvements to the other intersection. Mr. Barnowski?
The survey won't happen until sometime after
Yeah.
signs have been installed so that we get a clear before and after and not the chaos of brand new change for a bunch of people
Yeah,
who
fair
are
enough.
accustomed to something.
Yeah, no, thank you. Is that,
If I can, Your Worship, so you'll see the capital budget for the other pieces and be able to make a decision on that. And then after all of this is done, we then do the survey and bring the
Yeah.
information.
yeah, I appreciate it. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Good conversation. I appreciate it. How's everybody feeling? Do you need a 5-minute recess? Everybody good? No, everybody good? Okay. Oh, maybe we do. Mr. Barnowski?
Thank you. If I could, I do have a note to just confirm that Wynn was correct. The residents had asked for council to consider a number of traffic calming strategies, specifically by delegation. Council directed the study be done, or that a report come back. The report came back recommending that we use this partnered ICBC funding to do these studies. And so that's a editing and proofreading error on my part, and I should have caught that through the publishing process, but it is correct.
Okay.
Residents asked for traffic calming measures to be considered by council, and then that process has included these studies.
Thank you. Councillor Artie Kelly?
And if you don't mind, CAO, is it not sort of a standard or prudent to do a study before you make recommendations?
Yeah, certainly. I think myself and my colleagues sometimes are pretty risk averse, and we would rather have a qualified professional in that field make a recommendation before we endorse it to council. I think that there's varying levels of that risk aversion, and different councils have different levels of comfort with it as well. This council, early in its term, without a study, directed the 3-way stop at Kaketo and Mount Trinity. But in this case, requested the studies. And so, yeah, there's a variety of responses, but yeah, it is typical.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 7.2, Brown's Meat Market Building. Report from our Acting Director of Planning, Mr. Similini.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. All right. In late 2025, we received a demolition permit application for 295th Street, the building formerly known as Fernie Meat Market or Brown's Meat Market. Just quick background, it is located in Maintown, part of the historic downtown development permit area, as well as a building that is recognized on Schedule C our OCP, the buildings with heritage value. It is a building with heritage value not registered, which means that there isn't, it's not officially protected per se, but it is acknowledged by council that it does have heritage value, does have that heritage value through the schedule. Further to that, we did receive a report from the property owner, the applicant for the demolition permit. Outlook isn't great for the building. Structurally, it has been deemed by the engineer as unsound. Both the original building, which is the front piece, and then the addition, which is the back piece, the cinder block piece, were deemed beyond their service life and should be demolished. And then there's also some comments on occupant safety as well, that the building is headed towards structural failure and a risk to occupants and also adjacent property owners as well. So the report did note that the demolition should happen ASAP. I thought it was important to bring this forward to council because there is obviously some heritage value with that building. Even if the building itself is at a point of disrepair, the memories made at that building still carry a heavy value to the community. So very important to bring it forward to council tonight. Also note that the property owner, the applicant for the demolition permit, has been extremely communicative and cooperative with this process. And they are willing to talk with us about how we can look towards retaining some of that heritage value, if at all possible. So our recommendations tonight were to continue to communicate with that property owner, process the development permit in communication with the property owner, try to determine whether or not there is some way to save part of that building. Again, the report from the engineer looks at the structural integrity of it, but it doesn't actually look at is there parts of it that can be preserved or saved. It doesn't necessarily mean that parts of it would remain standing. It could mean removing brick and using it in other parts of the building, things like that, or even replicating the facade, the front facade, to try to mimic what was there in the past if the whole building does need to be taken down. So the other options are that we just allow the building to be demolished. In both options, it is in the historic downtown development permit area, and it is a heritage building, or a heritage property. So it would require a heritage alteration permit. So we would have that sort of ability to issue a permit to ensure that there is heritage value retained. And then the third option is to attempt to retain the entire structure, which could be considered tonight as well. So just a really brief presentation on that. I wanted to leave it open for discussion, and then we can move forward with communicating with the applicant.
Thank you, Ms. Simile. Councillor Adia Kelly, sorry, did you have? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Manager Similini partly actually just answered what I wanted to ask him. You know, looking at that brick fireplace, I'm wondering if it's bricks from the original fire hall that was demolished to build this building. Just thinking back on some of the heritage buildings that we did demolish over the years, example, the fire hall that used to sit here. That was maybe very unfortunate. But on the other hand, having read the engineer's report about this building, it does seem quite unsafe.
Yeah.
So not being a contractor, and Councillor Shoesmith would probably have a better idea of what it would take to make that building structurally sound, is probably an astronomical figure that just is not conceivable. But I kind of wondered, what teeth do we have? Like, can we say, we want you to retain those bricks? Like, you need to take it down in such a way that the bricks can be maintained, or et cetera. Like, what's our teeth there? And then what would our teeth be other than, is it form and character of historic downtown? Bearing in mind that it's flanked by buildings that are not historical looking at all. If you could help out with that.
Through to Councillor Adia Kelly, there are several options. I mean, if we were trying to retain the building, or if we wanted time to retain part of it, there is language in the, I believe, Local Government Act that allows us to put a quote unquote stay of execution on the building, 60-day after the permit is issued. But that being said, we did receive the demolition permit some time ago, so it may seem disingenuous for us to say, you know, we've been talking with you this whole time, and now we're going to lay the hammer down and not talk to you anymore and just put a 60-day delay on this. But in moving forward, we do have several options. I wouldn't necessarily call them teeth from a regulatory perspective of trying to stop the demolition, but several options that allow us to work with the applicant or with the property owner. One of those, as I mentioned, is a heritage alteration permit, which invokes it doesn't necessarily invoke our development permit guidelines, but it does allow us to invoke like the documents from the government of Canada as far as like heritage conservation and things like that. Another option potentially is a heritage revitalization agreement, which I don't know if this council has done one or not, but we did do one for the Trites Leroux mansion, which is a good example where that works well when the developer comes forward with a development plan. And if they need variances or zonings or things like that, we can actually put them all into one catch-all bylaw and then have language that helps to retain or maintain certain heritage character elements. So we could look at like the design, we could look at the design of the building, potentially exchange a parking variance for a replication of the facade, for example, things like that. What I think is a good option to move forward with is we do have through my network and several others with the city, we do have some heritage professionals that we can talk to. Worth looking at. It may be worth retaining one for a fee, which we could potentially bring forward in the budget. I know that there's a small amount of budget for contractors or consultants in our planning budget. It's not much. It might not be what we need, but we could look at that, bring that forward as well. Again, it's sort of a planning niche, if you will, right? And we don't have the overall expertise or experience to really put that forward. That being said, I think it's still worth having that conversation with the property owner to see what they want to do. In speaking with them, they were really focused on getting the building taken down because of the safety risk that's noted in the report from the engineer. They did not have a plan to redevelop at this point. So it would be a conversation of if the entire building is coming down, we would want to have that conversation with them when they come forward with an application to rebuild.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, and then Councillor Smith, Councillor Ramanathan.
Thank you. Yeah, to Councillor Audie Kelly's point, there have been a lot of fantastic historical buildings that have come down in our community, and you know, it's really sad to see that this is going to be another one. But I've been in that building and I did not stay in there for more than 60 seconds because I was afraid that it was going to come down. And this was 7-8 years ago. So I can only imagine the state it's in currently with lack of structural maintenance to it. So what where I kind of stand right now, or sit, I guess, is I'm okay with the building coming down and issuing the demolition permit, but you know, the comment about the bricks, it would be fantastic to get something in writing, an agreement to try and salvage, you know, some of those timbers in the photos in the report look like they were still in pretty good condition. The bricks, you know, they might need a little bit of a brush up, but if there is a way to kind of reclaim some of the original building materials and have them available for a future project, you know, just for cosmetic purposes only, perhaps. But if we can try and negotiate that, I think that would be my ideal outcome.
And if I may, Your Worship, just to comment on both Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Audie Kelly's comments. Previously, buildings were taken down in Fernie without this process happening, right? Yeah. And now we do have it, so we can have those conversations. And even if the building does need to come down, we can make it so we're not looking back 20 years from now and saying, "Oh, it's a shame that building came down without any regulation or without anybody knowing about it," or that type of thing, right? So that's part of why this process is so important.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Several things, so bear with me here. On the one hand, I see a moldering pile of decrepit building materials that might fall on somebody. And I worry that if we were to slow down the demolition, we might own a piece of that if that were to happen. That concerns me. And I myself, I have a lot of fond memories of that building. I can still taste the jerky. They made great sandwiches in there. Brownie was a good dude. But say you weren't from here and you didn't know who Brown's Butcher or Brown's Meat Market would have been. It's just a square box that's collapsing. It actually looks pretty terrible. And from that standpoint, an empty lot would actually be more appealing as part of our downtown, to be blunt. And then I look at it and I go, we used to have tunnels actually under the town, believe it or not. They went through IGS and stuff. And I was a little guy, but I was involved with it. We actually wound up shoring up the sidewalk in IGS because they were falling into the street, into the tunnels. And I find it really sad that when we did that, we actually pumped it full of slurry and we sealed that tunnel off forever. And what an awesome piece of heritage that would have been to have some, tunnel tours or something like that. So I'm kind of all over the place on this. Obviously, it has an emotional connection to a lot of people. It does have some heritage value, but it also presents a big risk to us. And, to somebody who doesn't have those memories, it's just an ugly box. I like where this thought is going of perhaps saving some bricks or what have you. When we did do the tunnels, there were skylights made of some purple glass because they had a speakeasy under there. The neighbor of this building, Fernie Forge, actually took all of those, managed to reuse them, and they're still floating around. You'll see them sometimes. I think we should probably do whatever the building owner is trying to do. I think we should probably help them expedite this project. It sounds like they have an eye on preserving some of the heritage, but I think the first thing should be to get rid of a building that is frankly a hazard. And then go from there. This is within our downtown zoning where we do have some say on what's going in there, form and character and what have you. So it's not this isn't a lost ship. It's a lost cause, sorry. I mean, the ship hasn't sailed. It's not like we'll approve this demolition and then there'll be a bunch of shoe boxes in a stack built up there. So thank you. I think we should probably allow them to carry on with their work.
Thank you. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think Councillor Shoesmith covered most of what I was thinking much better than what I had in my head. When I go there, I've been here only for 15 years, but Mark's memory still lives alive in our home, his smiling face. But you're right, getting safety first, and I think getting it responsibly demolished in the fastest possible time is the right path here. Having said that, Manager, in terms of form and character for future development, can you please explain to us what's the mechanism? How do you ensure that that happens so that we don't end up with a beige-looking shoebox in that same spot?
Through to Councillor Ramadas, our official community plan has the set of design guidelines, and those design guidelines for the historic downtown core have fairly detailed material types and things like that. It is a little bit of a walking the tightrope, so to speak, when you're building a new building versus an old building, because you don't want a new build to necessarily look like an old build. In this case, that you want to try to find a good balance because there is a heritage value there. So, I mean, a good example of a way to move forward would be to get what's called a statement of significance for the building, which then comments on character defining elements of the building, parapets, sills, things like that. And then there's maybe an opportunity to try to replicate some of those when you build the new build. So our heritage alteration permit process or heritage revitalization agreement process would allow us to do that.
Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, it's unfortunate that this building needs to come down, but it should. Safety concerns are number one. And I like the idea of reusing the brick.
Great, thank you. I don't have much more to add, Mr. Simulini. I do think, reflecting on Councillor Shoesmith's comments, there's significant emotional heritage value to this building as well. And I think we owe it to the community to do what we can to preserve some sense of the heritage there. And so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What is the best tool for us? Because I agree, like reading that engineering report, when there's daylight coming through those concrete walls and the step cracks and some of that brick was a bit frightening. What is the best tool at our disposal? Is it the heritage alteration permit, where we can collaborate with the owner, get the thing taken down, collaborate with the owner to preserve some sense of the heritage of that building for the community?
Yeah, Your Worship, I would suggest that the best path forward would be a heritage alteration permit, as opposed to a heritage revitalization agreement. HRAs, or heritage revitalization agreements, are typically used when you're trying to preserve a building, like the Treitzel roof, for example. Whereas heritage alteration permits, if you're dealing with something that is changing as much as a building coming down, it allows you to deal with that. The difference between a heritage alteration permit and a development permit in the downtown is, again, I commented with Councillor Ramadas, is it allows us to engage a heritage professional and stray away from our design guidelines a little bit, where a heritage professional can approve the design of the new building based on what the old building looked like, or those heritage, or those character defining elements of that old building. So I would suggest that the heritage alteration permit, or HAP, would be the best path forward.
Thank you. Yeah, it felt that way from your conversation and from the report. So thank you. Councillor Eddie Kelly and then Councillor Nixon.
I just wanted to ask Your Worship, Manager Similini. So let's say, for example, that we ask them to preserve what they can. Is that then a cost to the city because we're asking for it, or is that a shared cost, or is that a cost to the owner of the building?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Eddie Kelly, I don't know if we can force them to do that. So we would be asking them, that cost would be borne by the property owner. But again, getting a heritage alteration permit would hopefully allow them to preserve or replicate those parts that need to be preserved as well. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. This might just be a question. I'm just thinking about the future and other buildings that are out there that are heritage buildings that we might want to identify, or I mean, it looked like on that map that you have them identified already. And is there any way that we can prevent something like this from happening to any of these future buildings?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councillor Nixon, there are some tools that we can use, and our OCP, our current OCP from 2014 speaks to it a little bit, as does the Heritage Master Plan that Council adopted back in 2025, speaks to building a heritage register, a local heritage register for the city, where we look at heritage buildings throughout town and getting them on that registrar. So that's sort of where that clause for the delay in demolition comes in. The argument is that Schedule C in our OCP actually is a heritage register in the sense that council has recognized that those buildings have heritage value. But I think it's worth expanding on, because that list, that the red buildings on that list that are protected by bylaw, a lot of those bylaws are from the 80s. And then there wasn't really a whole lot of work done until more recently. So I think a more wholesome look at not just downtown, but the community as a whole is something that we can look at, and that would allow us to protect some of these buildings as well. And again, that's part of the ongoing OCP process as well, is using that heritage document to inform our OCP process.
Other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Similini, for bringing this. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ramadas.
Just one last point, Your Worship. If there is this heritage consultant that we could be retaining as part of this project, perhaps you can task this person with, to get that inventory of all the heritage buildings, not just in downtown, but outside also. Just a food for thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would, yeah, your worship through the council, that would be like a capital project that we could potentially look at, but
Yeah.
again, maybe worth further discussion down the road.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this to council, Mr. Semmelini, because it is, there's a long history of not just that building, but there is a sort of high degree of emotional attachment to the memories of, that building. And yeah, we want to be delicate with that and handle it carefully, and what we can do to preserve that heritage, I think it brings value to the community. So thanks for that.
Thank you, worship. Thanks, council.
Item 7.3, a report from our directors of park facilities and recreation. Mr. Logan.
Give me a sec while I shuffle some windows around. No one's closed their presentations. Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm seeking some feedback on 3 draft policies before incorporating the input and finalize them for presentation at a regular meeting of council for adoption. The outdoor spaces inspection, tree removal, and advertising and sponsorship policies have their own reports within the agenda, so I'll pause after each policy in tonight's presentation to discuss, take requests for more information, or answer questions before moving on to the next. So I thought it'd be beneficial just to go through our process for developing policies. So I'm going to quickly blaze through this. The slide outlines the city's internal process for developing policies. We begin by identifying the need for a policy. Several factors, including change in legislation, direction from council, public feedback, operational challenges, or alignment with strategic priorities can trigger that need. At this stage, we also review any existing policies to determine whether the issue can be addressed through an update rather than creating something new. As part of this step, staff create a complete a standard policy evaluation worksheet before moving forward. The second step, defining the scope and objective. Here we clearly establish the policy's purpose, identify who it will affect, outline what it will and will not cover, and ensure alignment with the city's objectives and legal obligations. The next step is research and analysis. Staff review best practices and comparable policies from other municipalities or relevant organizations. And this helps to ensure our approach is reasonable, defensible, and consistent with sector standards. We then move along to drafting the policy. Using a standardized policy template, staff develop clear and consistent language, ensuring the policy aligns with existing bylaws or other city policies that may overlap. Once the draft is prepared, we begin an internal review. This involves seeking input from other departments that may be affected, and this step is critical as it draws on staff's expertise across the organization to identify gaps, operational impacts, or unintended consequences. Following an internal review, the policy is sent to legal review to ensure compliance and risk mitigation. And where appropriate, we then conduct external consultation and consider feedback from user groups and stakeholders who may be impacted by the policy.
All three policies being presented this evening are now at step 7, which is finalization and approval. So your questions, comments, and feedbacks tonight will directly inform the final version, which will be brought back to you at a future council meeting. With that context, I'll now walk council through each policy, starting with the most straightforward one, the outdoor spaces inspection policy. The city currently owns and manages approximately 173 hectares of land designated as parks and green spaces. This portfolio includes a wide range of assets such as trails, playgrounds, open fields, and other outdoor amenities. They all require ongoing inspection and maintenance. The outdoor spaces inspection policy supports a consistent approach to identify hazards, assessing maintenance needs, and supporting ongoing public safety within the parks, facilities, and recreation portfolio. The policy was identified as a priority following guidance from the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia, or MIABC, which recommended formalizing and documenting our existing inspection practices, as well as clearly identifying their limitations. From a risk management perspective, having this policy in place helps demonstrate due diligence and provides clarity around how inspections are conducted. Importantly, it does not create new service levels or expectations. Instead, it formalizes what staff are already doing and ensures inspections and follow-up actions remain within current staffing capacity and available resources. City staff have long conducted regular inspections of outdoor spaces. However, historically, the documentation of those inspections and the consistency of follow-up actions have varied. In 2021, the city implemented SiteDocs software, which significantly improved our inspection program. SiteDocs provides a standardized and consistent framework for completing inspections, documenting identified hazards, and tracking required follow-up actions to support public safety. While the draft policy before council does not prescribe specific inspection intervals for each amenity, those operational details are embedded within the software itself. This allows staff to apply appropriate inspection frequencies based on asset type and risk, while keeping the policy itself focused on principles and accountability rather than operational details. During the research phase of this developing this policy, staff identified a draft outdoor inspection policy from 2003. This was never formally adopted. The policy being presented this evening effectively addresses that longstanding gap by formally documenting inspection practices and supporting hazard reductions in parks, play spaces, and trails. The policy does not prescribe fixed inspection timelines or response intervals. Seasonal workloads and staff levels fluctuate throughout the year, and there are periods when it may not be possible to address every identified risk immediately following an inspection or public report. To manage this responsibly, the policy allows for temporary closure or access restrictions when hazards are identified but cannot be mitigated right away. This ensures public safety while allowing staff to prioritize work based on risk and available resources. Policy also supports staff when developing service agreements with stakeholders or contractors and assists in establishing expectations for baseline inspections or safety practices. For example, the dirt jumps or the dog park. While it's not possible to guarantee that all public spaces are entirely risk-free, this policy provides a consistent and defensible framework for identifying hazards, managing risk, and demonstrating due diligence. Overall, it helps staff reduce risk in a practical and sustainable way. Any questions, comments, or feedback on this policy?
Council? Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. I think you answered it in your presentation, but the one question that I had that really kind of jumped out at me in this report is if we don't have a frequency in like a written frequency, how is it defensible if, there's a risk and it's gone, we haven't had staff capacity, so we haven't gone and checked, but it's a known risk in users and it's been there for 6 months without us doing anything. I'm not connecting the dots between creating a defensible, repeatable action, but not clearly articulating what that frequency or what that cadence might look like to ensure that, okay, we might not be able to solve the problem, at least we can identify that there is a problem has come up in the last little while.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Originally, the policy itself was quite detailed, and it was actually after a legal review where the language got very general for good reason, which is to protect us from adhering to specific intervals or, repairing a hazard within 5 days, for example. So a lot of those details, operational details of how we would handle something that was flagged to us through an inspection or a public inquiry through a request for service are outlined in the supporting documents of that policy, which would be procedural documents or inspection forms. A lot of those specific flags or follow-up items are managed through that software, as I mentioned, with, a ticking time essentially for us to get to that, and then a report to close that and show our due diligence that we've done that. And then also just mentioning our ability within the policy to close something like a playground, for example. If there's a broken swing set, we didn't have a part, or we couldn't get it to fix it fast enough, we would just sort of close that area with flagging tape or whatever until such a time as we could fix it.
Further?
So just to confirm, we do actually have a cadence to the reporting and to everything, but that's just kept in the operational workflow as opposed to at the policy level.
Correct. Yes. And part of this, once the policy is adopted, would be to socialize this amongst the staff and look at some of those intervals in site docs. Is it enough? Is it too much? Is it realistic within staff, other duties, all those types of things would be a part of this adoption of the policy.
Councillor Audie Kelly, then Councillor Romanes.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director Logan, the hazard prioritization that you refer to, can you just outline that a little bit? Like, is that what you just explained was embedded within site docs, or is that citizen driven, like report driven, or is it like, I'm trying to think of an example. We inspect the skate park maybe more frequently than we inspect the ballpark because there's bigger hazards at the skate park. I'm just trying to figure out that hazard prioritization piece.
Thank you for the question through the chair. We don't have like a consistent matrix that we would be applying everything through. It's sort of more referring to, say, for example, trails. So we might do an inspection sort of in the spring, and we might do one leading into the winter, but we're not going to inspect trails every week or even every month because the risk is relatively low, unless of course someone flags it to us, and then it's kind of a complaint basis response. And you compare that to something like a playground at Rotary Park, where during the summer and spring months, we'll inspect that, or we'll do park checks like every day. Inspections might be every week. We do have a certified playground inspector, and there's a checklist and all that. So there's different levels of inspections, and that's just referring to sort of the highest risk would get the most attention.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Maybe I'm getting too much into the weeds here, but let's say the toy train that we have in the Rotary Park. I'm just bringing that example because I remember some proponent from West Kootenay wanting us to donate to him, and we said no to that. So where will that sit in the grand scheme of things? Do you get to inspect that ever so often? And if yes, are there going to be repairs that's going to happen on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That train does keep me up at night sometimes. It does give the impression that it is a piece of playground equipment, just generally where it sits. However, it's not. And some suggestions from basically maintaining that over the year would be better signage. Of course, everyone sort of tends to not adhere to certain signage. We have done some work to that. That was a result of inspections where we found some pinch points and sharp things, and we did some cleanup on it and painted it. And that's the type of thing that might come across in like a more in-depth playground inspection by one of our certified playground inspectors. And then he might have some recommendations, but it's a bit of an anomaly in the fact that it's not a piece of playground equipment and it's more of like a heritage fixture. But this policy would probably get those conversations flowing. And another good example is that art piece that's by the art station, for example. It's also not a playground, but sometimes gets used as one. So, you know, does it warrant some sort of inspection on some sort of regular basis?
Further?
Your worship, one more example, and I'll shut up after this. What about the derrick in the visitor center?
Yep. Currently, there is no inspection interval for that. It would basically just be the operators that would be checking the pit toilet and doing regular maintenance. We would rely on the tenants there at the Visitor Information Center to report any concerns that, you know, visitors had pointed out. But again, this policy is sort of a step in the right direction for us to have some direction in order to, you know, more formalize some of that stuff.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So the inspectors for the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia looked at the Aquatic Center, the Maiden Lake, and James White. Now, did they look at some of these mentioned, like the Tetanus Express and the other thing at the yard station? Just curious.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So this was a number of years ago when I did this inspection with MIBC, and they kind of give you like a freebie visit. We could definitely engage them to inspect more things. My biggest concerns were James White, definitely with the trees that are there. So, you know, the dangerous tree that's coming up next also refers to that MIBC report. So some of their recommendations were like, hey, you got a lot of stuff to manage. You just got to write down what you do. You don't necessarily have to do more than you're doing. You just have to write down what you're doing. So you have something to fall back on to say, like, this is what we do. It might not cover all the gaps. It might not find all the dangers, but we're doing something.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. I appreciate what you said about there's the policy piece and then there's a procedures piece that backs that up, because as Councillor Hamilton pointed out, the policy talks about the frequency of inspections, for example, but then goes on to say they'll be inspected regularly, which is pretty vague. But I appreciate how, you know, it commits us to doing it, and there is a procedure piece that would, well, you know, we would track it. The regular inspections, we would track it, and any deficiencies that were identified. So I appreciate that clarification. I didn't have anything else on this policy.
Okay, so now we move on to 7.4, which is the tree removal policy. So as I mentioned earlier, I guess I should bring up my slide again. We are. So as I mentioned earlier, the city manages approximately 173 hectares of land designated as park or green space. Most of these areas contain a significant number of trees varying in age, size, species, and condition. The draft tree removal policy has been prioritized by the Parks, Facilities, and Recreation Department to clearly define the level of service related to city-owned trees, both for the public and for staff. Until recently, the majority of dangerous tree concerns, estimated at approximately 75 requests per year, have been submitted through the city's online request service tool and managed by the PFR department. Each of these situations typically requires about 3 hours of staff time, including site assessments, documentation, coordination, action, and follow-up. Collectively, that represents an estimate of 225 staff hours annually, which has a noticeable impact on the department's ability to meet other operational commitments. The draft policy was developed in consultation with MIABC, and while there's no single best practices for managing hazardous trees, MIABC advises that operational needs, available resources, and financial considerations are key factors in determining an appropriate and defensible approach. Staff are confident that this policy provides a clear framework to document assessments, decisions, and actions, and to develop due diligence in the management of tree-related risks. This slide speaks to why the tree removal policy is important at this time. So first, the policy responds to increased tree-related risks, including the impacts of more frequent and severe weather events. These increase the likelihood of a tree failing, which in turn raises public safety and liability concerns. This policy formalizes how requests for service are assessed, prioritized, and documented, and distributed among departments, ensuring consistency in how concerns are handled across the community. This is critical not only for operational clarity, but also for demonstrating due diligence when decisions are questioned or reviewed. By establishing clear criteria and process, the policy supports decisions that protect public safety, private property, and city infrastructure while balancing operational realities. This policy applies only to trees that are on city property and is focused specifically on safety-based tree removals. It does not apply to privately owned trees, nor is it intended to address routine pruning or aesthetic considerations. The policy references the existing 1985 tree bylaw, which is very specific to private landowners with trees, shrubs, or brushes that become problematic to roadways, sidewalks, or utility services. In situations where an immediate risk to public safety is identified, such as a structural failure, disease, or storm damage, the policy allows for emergency tree removals to prevent injury or damage. It is important to note that this policy does not create a comprehensive tree inventory or a broader urban forestry management strategy. Both of those would require separate planning, funding, and council direction. Finally, the policy is designed to be implemented using existing resources. Where special expertise is required, staff rely on certified arborists or contractors, as is the current practice. Any questions, comments, or feedback on this policy?
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I did have one question about this policy, and reading it and kind of reviewing the report, there's nothing in it considering the underground aspect of trees. And I'm curious if it's an issue that we, it's out of sight, out of mind, but I'm thinking specifically roots and impacting water lines, sewer lines, anything like that, and how we handle those situations. Like, would that kind of issue be encompassed in this policy, or would that be dealt with in a different policy?
Thank you for the question through the chair. The existing 1984 or whatever it was tree policy, it does touch briefly on that. It's very specific to trees obstructing sidewalks, trees obstructing traffic signage. And I think it does touch on the infrastructure question, but it's a decent thing to highlight because that is a very basic policy. I think it's one page with like a couple paragraphs. So I will discuss with the Director of Engineering and Public Works on whether or not we could probably enhance some of the language around that if it helps them in those situations. We have experienced, because there are a lot of tree requests, we have experienced, for example, roots of a tree destroying a fence. So in those scenarios, it's kind of just working with the landowner to see what's acceptable to them. Do we want to start ripping out trees because their roots are in someone else's property? Probably not. And I think everyone can agree that trees are a good thing to keep around. they benefit the community and the residents that live around them. So it's a common thing.
Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. Do we ever get any requests for services for unsightly or not unsightly, but dangerous trees on private property as well? Like, I mean, that are inside people's private property that, yeah.
Thank you for the question.
You know
Through
what
the
I mean.
chair, all the time. Which you'll notice some language in there. We do rely on our GIS mapping. Sometimes we'll refer just as a general idea of where the trees might be. Even just Google Earth. A lot of times we'll ask a resident to flag whatever tree's in question. So it's very clear, is it sitting on their property? Is it outside their fence? If it comes down to it and we can't actually determine where the tree is, the policy does say that the landowner would be then required to provide some proof of their property line through a survey, a land survey, to determine whose tree it is to deal with. There's examples from way back in the past where we've had some pretty decent cottonwoods that were dangerous, that were straddling properties, where we just worked with the landowner and they were willing to contribute some, and we contribute some money, and we'd coordinate the contractor and they'd throw in some money to get rid of the dangerous tree. But quite often, it is hard to determine where the tree is, and there are times where it's not a city tree, and then they can deal with it as they want at their own cost.
Mr. Bornowski?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as a point of clarification to Councillor Hamilton's question, Ms. Weir flagged the sanitary sewer service connection maintenance policy, CP 2018-004, which I can send around to council or a corporate officer can following the meeting, deals with stuff like root infiltration causing blockages and responsibilities for sanitary water lines. So
Thank you. And well done for Director Weir for knowing that off the top of her head. Sorry, Mr. Logan.
Sorry, yeah, that's also a good thing to note, where we reference in the policy which other bylaws or policies are applicable. So I will note that.
Pardon my ignorance here. Is there an opportunity for public input?
You missed it at the beginning. It's at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, I'm bringing this back up. Okay, we're good to move on to the next one.
Please.
Okay, this is 7.5. So now I'll turn to a policy that's a bit less straightforward than the previous two, the advertising and sponsorship policy. The base of the content in this draft policy initially formed part of the Municipal Facilities and Parks User Regulation and Fees bylaw. At that time, the bylaw was informed by a review of similar bylaws and policies from other municipalities, including Pitt Meadows, Tate, Terrace, Chase, Port Coquitlam, Vernon, Saskatoon. During council's consideration of bylaw 2484, which is that user fee regulation bylaw, direction was provided to remove the advertising and sponsorship provisions from the bylaw and instead develop a standalone policy. This was intended to provide greater flexibility and clearer administrative guidance. Since then, the draft policy has evolved significantly. As staff engaged with user groups and stakeholders, it became clear that advertising and sponsorship practices were being applied inconsistently. Concerns were raised about inequitable opportunities between user groups, as well as a lack of clarity around what was permitted and under what conditions. The core objectives of the policy remain consistent with the original intent of the user fee and regulation bylaw: to recover costs associated with advertising and sponsorship at city-owned facilities, to provide structure and equitable opportunities for user groups, and to formally acknowledge sponsorship and advertising at city-owned facilities through clear agreements. The primary purpose of this policy is to bring consistency and clarity to how advertising and sponsorship agreements are assessed and approved. Over time, staff have encountered long-standing confusion amongst user groups regarding what is permitted, what approvals are required, and how sponsorship opportunities are allocated. This policy responds to those concerns. In developing the draft, staff reviewed practices from other municipalities, and while approaches vary, the draft reflects common practices and lessons learned from those we reviewed. The policy was also developed in consideration of the city's consolidated bylaw number 1888. That bylaw regulates sign design and special events, but explicitly does not apply to advertising or signage located within facilities. This gap is one of the key reasons for a dedicated advertising and sponsorship policy. Through user group engagement and internal review, the policy establishes minimum standards for agreements, which supports transparency and ensures fairness. This policy sets out criteria and process for assessing advertising and sponsorship requests, provides staff with direction when responding to inquiries, and the policy does not prescribe advertising size, style, or placement details. It also does not imply that the city is actively pursuing advertising opportunities, and it does not establish fees or costs related to negotiations or agreements. The policy applies to the existing and new relationships between the City of Fernie and businesses, organizations, and individuals who contribute financially or in kind to city facilities, programs, services, user groups, or events in exchange for recognition or promotional considerations. It covers several common situations, including the sponsorship of city-owned or city-endorsed programs, facilities, or events, user group displaying recognition of local businesses that support the development or sustainability of nonprofit organizations operating within city facilities, and businesses contributing financially or in kind towards facility renovations, equipment purchases, or new construction. It's important to note that advertising and sponsorship already exists at city facilities and within city programs. This policy does not introduce these practices, rather it provides a consistent framework for managing them. Many user groups currently rely to varying degrees on sponsorship and advertising to support their operations, and as a result, staff recognize that any change to how advertising and sponsorship are managed must be approached carefully and thoughtfully. The policy acknowledges that the need to recover costs for the installation, ongoing upkeep, and eventual removal of advertising or recognition material, and several user groups will benefit from this clarity and structure this policy provides. Overall, the policy intends to balance operational fairness, cost recovery, and transparency while recognizing the realities of existing sponsorship relationships and considers staff capacity. Any comments, questions, or feedback on this?
No, that policy seemed pretty straightforward. No, and I think consistency, I mean, is key in all of these. So thank you for that. Other comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Logan.
Thank you.
Item 7.6, AKBLG resolutions, report from our Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do not have a presentation to accompany this report. I'll just do a very brief verbal introduction and then can support council in any dialogue here, and we can discuss next steps of how to move these forward. As council may know, the Association of Kootenay Boundary Local Governments, or AKBLG, it is the local government association that represents municipalities and electoral areas in our part of the province. It includes the RDKB, Kootenay Boundary, CK, Central Kootenay Regional District, and the RDEK, RRD. It also includes the town of Golden and the village of Valemount. So it's not specifically around regional district boundaries, it's a collection. It was established in 1933 as one of the 5 area associations, and as you are likely aware, presently we have Kevin McIsaac, Councillor Kevin McIsaac serving as president, and Councillor Kyle Hamilton serving as director at large for the association. The AGM and convention is coming up. Each year, we receive a request from the coordinator for resolutions that come forward from municipalities and member electoral areas or regional districts for then debate, discussion, dialogue at the convention and AGM. Those that are endorsed then come as a package representing our multiple jurisdictions and are forwarded on to the Union of BC Municipalities for the annual conference and AGM each fall. The City of Fernie generally puts forward some or a resolution at least each year aligned with current local and regional priorities, strategic plans, emerging issues. I have listed some of the past resolutions that have come forward, including lowering barriers to implement GHG reductions, cost recovery for emergency response after dialogues with other municipalities, identifying there may be opportunities to improve that with highway response, vote weighting at regional districts, mental health supports for elected officials alongside Sparwood. Sometimes these are multi-jurisdictional, sometimes they're specific to just our municipality, but AKBLG does represent a really effective forum for their discussion and an opportunity to either identify that, yes, these are shared concerns for member electoral areas and municipalities, or B, there are insights on the specific issues that we're experiencing shared by other municipalities and electoral areas wherein we can learn from their advancements and then adapt that emerging practice to our own, to our municipality. With that, we do generally keep track of what Dialogues Council has had throughout the year in terms of materials that they would like to bring forward to AKBLG. The only one that I have presently in my tracker to suggest to council is the local water governance table matter, which was discussed here earlier. The reason for the report now is that we have plenty of lead time, meaning we have another 2 meetings before the submission deadline. And so I will be supporting the corporate officer in bringing forward a report on Feb 10th and then again on the 17th to support further dialogue and then seek endorsement for the specific resolutions. And in between those dates, if there were resolutions council wanted to bring forward, our corporate officer or other staff could directly work with council to tighten up those draft resolutions for those meetings to bring them forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bornowski. Questions, comments from council? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just one minor clarification in the report. The first formal call for submissions did go out November 5th. So just to clarify that.
Well, I do recall the conversation about the water board when I think Living Lakes and ERA were here. I feel like there were, and this is not on you, Mr. Bornowski, I feel there were other subjects that we have discussed that we've said perhaps that would, and I would challenge council to rack their brains and see if you can remember what they are. Councillor Roddy Kelly, did you have a question, comment?
I was trying to rack my brain, Your Worship. The only one I could think of was we briefly touched on the model potential support for firefighting in your community, the way the sort of the RCMP thing is structured.
Yeah, the cost share.
The cost share sort of model.
Either regional cost share or potentially provincial cost share.
I honestly can't think of anything else.
Yeah, thank you for, I remember that conversation now that you raised it, yeah. So what are next steps, Mr. Bornowski? As I recall in the past, there's been a bit of a brainstorming session that we would send potential ideas through to our corporate officer, and she would in turn aggregate those and we'd come back and decide as a council whether we wanted them to advance. Is that sort of roughly the process we're in now? Okay. Councillor Emness.
Can you remind your worship or someone from the council, like what we decided on that water governance board? Because I was not here, unfortunately. Was that a vote from the council?
I think it was just an idea to, and forgive me, I don't remember either. There was no resolution. It was just a question through AKBLG about the nature and experience of other communities with water boards across the province. I think it was more of a query, if I recall correctly, because it wasn't clear even from those presenting, what the nature and impact of that would be to a community like ours. So we were, I think, more inclined to ask a question, if I recall correctly. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, which I haven't done. Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. So it was a pretty nebulous request. It was creation of a provincial system of local watershed boards, and the system would serve as a cornerstone of a modern watershed governance framework. So we had lots of questions as a council, and we were reluctant to sign the letter requesting the province to set up these watershed boards. So that was going to be referred to. We were thinking about referring that to AKBLG as well.
Yeah.
And I think Kevin McIsaac, Councillor McIsaac was in favor of that, but.
Yeah, I think that was suggested that it be moved to AKBLG, but I don't know if anyone's had subsequent discussions with those folks or not, so I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Councillor Ramirez.
Your worship, if it is so nebulous at this table, I just don't want to give the impression that we are somehow endorsing it. That's my worry here. Like, we ourselves don't know what it is. So why broach that subject?
Yeah, which is why I say I think we were going to advance it more as a question to other communities about their experience. But I as I say, I'd have to go back to my notes. I can't really recall. Councillor Shoesmith and then Councillor Nixon.
Just another thick coat of paint here. The funding model was completely nebulous, as were the proposed extent to their powers.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't endorse something that open-ended.
Yeah.
And I mean, Elkford did sign on, and I think maybe Sparwood too, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but they did have Tanoha support.
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, that was one of the subjects. So I would encourage the rest of council to, if you have ideas you'd like to bring forward and think either have a local and potentially regional impact and interest, to forward those to our corporate officer, and then we can debate them. Councillor Nixon.
And I mean, the using DCCs for fire protection and stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, if you want to think about your resolutions, go into the resolution database for UBCM, and you'll see that there's been a lot of requests, like where Provincial Responsibility for Fire Services Act and regulations was already discussed in 2019 with a response already. So there is quite an intensive database that you can go and have a look at if you have an idea for one as well. So I can send that out to council as well.
Would you mind sending a link? Because it would be helpful. We'd probably, we wouldn't waste time. If something's gone to, UBCM and the province hasn't moved on it in 30 years, then why would we do it again? Councillor Hamilton.
Well, following that train of thought, UBCM has already declared that they will not be accepting any resolutions that have already been addressed in the last, I don't know, can't remember what the cutoff was, but if there's a resolution on the books, they're not going to look at it again.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. And to just add to that, and I think UBCM wanted to have more of a forceful arrow when they were, I mean, not an arrow, a point to the province when they were coming with the requests as well, because it just seemed like we were, or the UBCM was submitting, 500, 600 resolutions, which takes a lot of time to resolve. So I think they wanted to narrow it down as well.
Yeah, because
from my understanding.
Well, the experience at FCM, of course, is there's a handful that are discussed at the convention and they are advanced to the federal government. So not always. Okay, thank you. I think, Mr. Barnes.
Just in terms of process, tomorrow I'll work with the corporate officer to make sure that you get copies of the last few years of the resolution books from AKBLG emailed to you. So you have those links and a direct link to that resolution database.
Okay.
And then we'll suggest a deadline sometime in the next week or so for your draft ideas so that those can be brought to the corporate officer and added to the report on the 10th or the 17th in advance of the deadline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Audie Kelly.
One that I can think of that for Councillor McIsaac was I can't, maybe CAO can help me. You know where there's been a gas station CAO, like what was that called again? Where it's, the property's kind of been.
Sterilized?
Yeah, to
Yeah.
sterilize it, because there's all these
Yeah.
sort of like leftover dead gas stations,
Yeah, contamination.
contamination.
Yeah.
I can remember Councillor McIsaac wanting to bring that forward.
And yeah, we'll have to check with him what the question was, but I think it had to do with provincial support for rehabilitation of those sites. Yeah.
I can search. I recall a debate around a provincial framework requiring some sort of a fund to be established for
Mhm.
remediation after closure, similar
Mhm.
to what you would have, similar to what you maybe ought to have for wells on private property. And when they're decommissioned, there's then some sort of fund to close them and maintain them. But I've made a note and can look that up.
Thank you. Anything else on this item? With that, unless there's anything else, we will adjourn the committee of the whole at 9:06 PM.